Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Becca and welcome to the first episode of Last Current Next. In these videos I'm going to be talking about the books that I've just finished reading, the books that I'm currently reading, and then finally the books that I'm planning on reading next from my TBR. And without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right in. The books that I most recently finished. First, I have The Fellowship of the Ring by J.R.R. Tolkien, and this has been on my TBR for like ever, and I'm glad I finally got to it. I listened to the BBC adaptation, the full cast adaptation that they recorded, I think, in the 70s, and I absolutely loved it. It was such a great recording, such a great cast. It was so lively, so fun to listen to, and just like a great way to enjoy the story. Now, I've never actually read the actual full-length novel, and you may be like, why are you counting an abridged version of this book? Because I tried to read this book, and I plan on reading it completely one day, but listening or reading Frodo walk through the Shire for 100 pages was just like a little bit too much. So I'm definitely going to try it again, but listening to the BBC adaptation was just so fun. I just started a new job, and being able to listen to audiobooks during my commute is like fantastic. Audiobooks are saving my life right now, and listening to the BBC broadcast was just amazing. I'm not going to explain what this book is about because I'm assuming most of us already know, but what I really loved about the BBC broadcast, and I'm assuming the book as opposed to the movie, is Sam's character, Samwise Gamgee. He's not my favorite character from the movies. My favorite character is Pippin, but the way that like his character is described and the way that he was acted as was just so heartwarming, and just, I mean, like, Sam is already like a really heartwarming character who just cares about Frodo so much, but to just learn more about his love for gardening specifically, and then what Galadriel gives him is just like, I like teared up a little bit at that. I was just like, so precious. Loved it so much, and I'm very excited to continue with the BBC broadcast because it's just so good, and I've been listening to it all through Libby, so check your local library ebook apps to see if they have the audiobook versions because they're just so good. And then another book that I just finished reading was Before the Ever After by Jacqueline Woodson. Again, I listened to the audiobook, and wow, I'm just like astonished. I just very recently read or listened to Brown Girl Dreaming, which is her like memoir biography, and they're both written in verse, and I just so good. She's like a master at storytelling. I can already tell from only reading 2 books. Anyway, the Before the Ever After is about our main character as a child and how he interacts with his father, who we learn as the story progresses is dealing with, they don't ever give him like a diagnosis, but from suffering from many concussions from being a football player, a professional football player, and kind of like how that has affected his life with his son and his friends and his family, and just like the way that he sees his dad and how it changes over time. And I went in knowing nothing about this novel. I just decided to listen to it because National Poetry Month, but also like it was a really short audiobook that I was like, I know I can finish that in a couple of days with my commute. And I just really enjoyed it. I didn't know anything about it. I had no idea that it was about football. You know what's really strange that I'm learning about myself is that while I hate sports in real life for the most part, I actually really like reading books about sports. Like, sport romances are some of my favorite romances, and I know that's super weird. This is not a romance, but what I'm saying is that even though I hate football, I actually really enjoyed reading this book that was about a kid and his dad who is a professional football player. I don't like poetry very often, and reading in verse is not really my first choice, or reading a book that's written in verse is not really my first choice, but she is just completely blowing my mind with her storytelling, and I highly recommend her books. This one, I don't know if it's middle grade particularly. The narrator makes the main character sound probably like 5th or 6th grade in the very beginning, maybe even younger than that. So I don't know what age range but I really liked it. Highly recommend. And those are a couple of the books that I've recently finished, and now I'll jump into the books that I'm currently reading. First, I want to talk about Punching the Air by Ibi Zoboi, which is also a book that is written in verse, and I'm listening to the audiobook for. Again, April is National Poetry Month, so I'm like, books in verse, let's do this. This book also really getting to me, super emotional. It is about a boy. Again, I don't read descriptions, so because I'm not completely through the novel, it might not be 100% one point to what it actually is about. But it's about a boy who is sent to juvenile detention so far. I don't know if he eventually goes to prison for nearly killing a white boy. And so far, I do feel like there's something that we're not getting, like we haven't gotten to what actually happened, so I'm interested to see where it goes from there. But also it's just like a great narrative about like the, what is it called, the school to prison pipeline. This book is just like so emotional, and reading it from like a teenage boy's perspective, well, a woman who is writing a teenage boy's perspective, it's just very emotional. And it's also, I think it's either co-written or Ibi Zoboi has gotten some like consultation with Yusuf Salam, who was actually convicted of a crime that he didn't commit, and I think he served, I don't quite remember how long it was, but he served quite a bit of that sentence and then was later released along with I think 3 or 4 other boys for because they were convicted of attacking and raping a white woman, and later a white man had come confessed to that crime. And it's very interesting case. I highly recommend looking it up. I will try to put a link in the description box, but I just think it's a great story to tell, because how many people go to prison and aren't guilty? How many people are guilty and get a harsher prison sentence than other people who are just a different race, you know? So I think it's an important discussion, and this book is very powerful and just so well written. And this is the first, well, this isn't the first book that I've read by Ibi Zoboi, but it's the first book that I've read that she's written in verse, and I'm loving it. It's so good. So highly recommend that book. And because I'm kind of reading 2 heavy books right now, I'm going to sandwich in between a not very heavy book, and I'm reading Bait and Witch by Angela M. Sanders. I've never read a cozy mystery before, and then I went to Barnes & Noble last weekend and on a whim saw this cover. I was like, first in a series, let's see, and I just like glanced at the back. Librarian, okay. The library housed in a Victorian mansion. Okay. Witch, okay. So I was just like very intrigued by just like, I didn't even read any more than that. Just like there's very few little snippets of information. I was just like, okay, I'm gonna pick this up. And I'm currently on page 92, and I'm loving it so far. Like, I was not expecting to like it so much. It's not as like light as I thought it was gonna be. I thought it was gonna be pretty dark, pretty light, but like it's a mystery, like someone dies, so it's gonna be a little dark, you know? And it is about a woman who is kind of stuck in this place where she has given information to the FBI about a certain congressman, and so because she's kind of worried for her life, she, before like the trial, decides to leave and go cross country and start working at this library in Oregon. And it's in this very tiny town, and when she gets there, it's kind of like a little dark. I wouldn't say creepy, but witchy vibes, you know? And she learns that the community or people who are on the board, the library board, are trying to bulldoze the library in order to put up some kind of like touristy type thing to bring in more money for the community, because they're not doing so well after the mill in the community had been closed down 25 years ago. And then, almost as shocking, Josie learns that she's descended from a long line of witches, which is super fun. I haven't gotten to that part yet, but like there are like little snippets of like, what is this, what's happening, what is this kind of power, I don't want to call it power, but like, I'm really liking it so far. I feel like it's like every librarian who like really wants to be a kind of reader's advisory librarian, it's like every like one of those types of librarian's dreams, because she is a librarian for one. She goes to a small library in a mansion where she's in charge, and she, because she's a witch, is like these reader recommendations are just like flying right out of her brain, and like she feels like she's got like the best intuition with like recommending books, and I'm just like, this is amazing. And she also has a cat, like a library cat, so like, I mean, it's so cute. And the last book that I'm currently reading and will be and have been reading for a while is Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. This is the next book for my library book club we're discussing in the beginning of May, so I really need to get a crack on this because I've only read the prologue and the first chapter. And this is also a very heavy book. It was first published in 1952, and it's about like racism in America at that time, and our narrator kind of realizing how he's being treated differently in certain situations and how he decides to be an invisible man. Like the first chapter alone, it was hard to stomach, like, and it wasn't even like, I mean, it's bad, it's very bad, but it's not even like the worst thing that you could think of, and still like my stomach was turning, and it's sickening, and it's hard to read, but it's important to read. It's important to know about the history of racism in America. I posted on Instagram that I had started reading this, and somebody in the comments was like, I can't say I enjoyed this book, but it was such an important read. And I think that's how exactly it's going to feel when I finish it. That I will not say that I enjoyed it, because how can you know, but being able to read this and learn from it, as we should, you know, I think that's what's important, and that is what's gonna get me through reading this book, because just finishing that first chapter, it's so hard to pick back up. But also, my not coworker anymore because I left the library, but she was telling me that like it's hard to read, but keep reading. So definitely gonna keep reading. Hope to get at least one chapter read this weekend. But I'm also annotating it, and this is also a pre-owned copy that has a lot of annotations in it, so that's kind of fun. Makes up. So that is what I am currently reading right now. And then the books that I am planning on reading next, not in a kind of like, as I finish these, I'm going to start reading these. I'm just going to start reading them when I want to start reading them, because that's how I live my life. First off, I want to start reading this weekend House of Leaves by Mark Danielewski. I told my sister I was going to start reading this last weekend, and I didn't. So I'm going to start reading it this weekend. I don't know how to explain this book. It's about found footage in a haunted house, I think, and it's a fiction book. And then there are footnotes about this footage, and footnotes to those footnotes about this footage. I talked about this in a recent video. Kayla from Books and Lala is doing this for her April book club. I don't know. And she talked about it and made me want to pick it up. And I blame her for the reason of me having to lug this friggin' heavy book around a bookstore for an hour. I'm telling you, if you ever plan on buying this book, make sure it's the last thing you pick up before you leave the bookstore, because walking around the store for an hour with this book was torture. I'm being dramatic, it's not torture. This week I probably will start reading Dearest by R.S. Gray. Somebody I follow on Instagram posted in her stories about the newest novella that's a part of this series, and I was like, oh, that sounds interesting, let me download that. And then I was like, oh, but there's a first book in the series, I'll just read that too. So I downloaded it, and it's about a doctor. It's a rom-com. There are doctors. I'm assuming there are non-doctors. I know nothing about this book except for the fact that it's a rom-com, and the cover looks just cheesy enough for me to want to read. That's what I'm hoping to get from this book. And then the last book that I'm hoping to read very soon, because it's about to come out, but The Soulmate Equation by Christina Lauren. I am so thrilled to have gotten an ARC for, and I want to read it very soon because I just love all of their books, and I really, really, really want to get this one read. All I know about it is that it's kind of a dating service that is based on your DNA. I think these two people who are like kind of high figures in some kind of company or whatever are matched by their DNA, and then the company, the dating company, asks them to fake date to get them like free advertising or something like that. That's, I don't know. I don't know that it's actually about that. I guess we'll see. But that is The Soulmate Equation by Christina Lauren that I'm really excited to start reading soon. And there you have my last reads, my current reads, and my books that I'm hoping to read soon. So I hope you liked this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I would really appreciate your support. If you've made it all the way to the end, tell me what book you're currently reading and put your favorite emoji right next to it. And I will see you in a new video soon. Bye!